A lot of people have never had money and they don't need money. So we get rejected like that a lot because, you know what? They don't care about that stuff. They don't care about your money. They never had it. They're never going to have it.
Look at that. That's cool.
Careful on the heads.
And I put these in a box in there.
If I could pick anyone that I really want, it would be the first year, 1936 Knucklehead.
When Frank Fritz passed away, most people remembered him for his time on American Pickers, for his sharp eye and love of forgotten machines. But no one expected what would be discovered behind the locked doors of his private garage. Hidden among his known collection was something strange. A vehicle that didn't appear in any official records. No one had seen it. No one had heard of it. And once the tarp was pulled back, everything changed. What was it? Why was it kept secret? And could it really be what some think it is? Chasing more than cars. Frank Fritz wasn't just someone who collected cars. He searched for them. He went looking for stories hidden under layers of dust and rust, chasing down pieces of the past wrapped in metal and chrome. From the moment he first appeared on American Pickers, it was obvious that Frank wasn't chasing the spotlight. He was chasing the thrill. What mattered most to him were the things time had forgotten. And for Frank, few things told a better story than an old car with history behind it. To casual viewers, Frank came across as the quiet one, the man with quick comebacks and a deep knowledge of old gas station signs and oil cans. But people who paid close attention noticed something more. They saw how his voice changed when he spotted a rare muscle car almost swallowed by weeds. They noticed how he paused just a little longer in someone's garage when something special was hidden there.
The best thing that Frank purveyed is that antiques are just like a big Easter egg hunt. You know, when you go to an antique store, you're looking in the corners, or if you're in somebody's garage, and it's the joy of the hunt.
Frank didn't just collect cars. He believed they were worth saving. His personal collection grew over the years, not with speed, but with purpose. He never cared about showing off. There were no fancy displays, no red ropes, just a simple garage tucked away in Iowa, filled with machines that felt like they had come from another time. Inside was a 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air, a model he always appreciated for its smooth curves and tail fins. Then there was the 1967 Ford Fairlane GT 390, which he had bought for $7,000 and poured another $4,000 into to restore. He even owned a 1960 Cadillac Fleetwood, bought with his longtime friend Mike Wolfe, fully loaded and built for comfort. But Frank didn't stop there. When he believed something was truly special, he didn't hesitate to invest. That's how he ended up with two 1954 Nash Healey sports cars, which he purchased for a total of $46,000. Then came a 1914 Metz cycle car, a strange and rare three-wheeler from another time, estimated to be worth about $35,000. But his favorite of all might have been the 1947 Cisitalia Nuvolari Spider, an incredibly rare post-war Italian car, fast and featherlight, worth over $500,000. It was the crown jewel of his hidden garage. Each car had its own backstory, and Frank knew everyone by heart. Whether he found them in an old barn, hauled them across states, or won them in a late-night online auction, he could always tell you where they came from, what they meant, and why they deserved another chance. These weren't just purchases. As Frank saw it, they were rescue missions. Each one reminded him, and everyone else, that the past still mattered. Even after years of TV success, Frank never let the attention change his approach. He didn't chase social media fame. He didn't open his doors for public tours. His garage remained private, a personal space, filled with dust and tools, old catalogs, and grease-stained parts. It was sacred to him. Friends say he could vanish in that garage for hours. Sometimes he was fixing things, other times, just sitting there with the cars that meant the most to him. That kind of quiet connection, especially in a world where everything is posted and shared, felt deeply personal. And that's where the mystery begins. Because not everything Frank discovered made it on screen. Not every purchase was public. As the years passed, he withdrew more and more, He became harder to reach. His garage, once a sign of his love for vintage machines, became something deeper and more hidden. No one really knew what was inside, not even the people who knew him best. And after he passed, when the locks were finally removed and the heavy doors opened, what they discovered inside would change everything. But before we get there, we need to understand how far Frank's obsession truly went, and why many believe it was never really about money, or even the cars themselves.
I mean, that guy's like a bloodhound. He just went right to it.
S&H green stamps. Now, this isn't porcelain. $40.
Yeah.
The quiet fade. As Frank Fritz slowly disappeared from American pickers, the world lost its window into his life. What started as a gradual step back became permanent. By 2020, Frank had left the show without making a big deal about it. He said it was because of back surgery and personal health problems. At the time, most fans figured he'd return eventually. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart.
Felt really, really bad. You'd go to see him in the nursing home, and how you doing, Frank? And one half of his body was completely done.
His health issues weren't just temporary. They were signs of something bigger. According to those close to him, Frank began to cut himself off. He didn't answer the phone as much, didn't invite people over, and spent most of his time alone at home. But this wasn't just any home. Frank lived inside a piece of history. His garage had once been a place full of energy, where old machines came back to life. Over time, that space grew quiet, more private, even stranger. He didn't say much about what he kept inside, and even his closest friends hadn't stepped into it in years. Now and then, he shared small glimpses with the public. There was a photo he posted on Facebook of his 1939 Plymouth Coupe, with a caption that showed how proud he was to own it. In another post, he mentioned the Ford Fairlane and how good it felt to hear it roar again after repairs. But those updates stopped. And not long after, so did the posts altogether. As Frank's condition got worse, the doors to that garage stayed closed. But while he wasn't out picking anymore, he was still collecting. His collection kept growing. If he couldn't go in person, he'd send someone to inspect a vehicle for him. Sometimes he'd just buy it without seeing it at all. That might sound risky, but it wasn't. Frank had been doing this for decades. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every purchase still had a purpose. One of the last confirmed vehicles he bought was unusual. It had no shine, no badge, and no muscle car look. Just a weird shape, faded paint, and no clear label. When a neighbor asked about it, Frank simply said, "It's older than you think." Then he pushed it into the garage and locked the door. That was more than a year before he passed away. What set Frank apart from other collectors wasn't how many cars he had. It was why he collected in the first place. He didn't follow trends. He didn't stockpile just to say he owned the most. He was looking for meaning in the machines he found. That's part of why his final years are still hard to explain. If he was still hunting for cars, while sick, mostly alone, what was he really after? There were rumors. One story claimed Frank kept a secret list of rare vehicles tied to forgotten American car legends, prototypes, race cars, half-finished ideas that vanished before they ever hit the road. Another rumor said he had been in talks with a retired GM worker who hinted he had access to a car nobody had seen since the 1960s. Nothing solid, just whispers from deep corners of the collector world. But some things are confirmed. In the months before he passed, Frank made some odd, meaningful comments to friends. He once said, "There's something in that garage that'll outlive all of us." In another moment, he reportedly told someone, "If they ever open that garage without me, tell them I left everything behind." Back then, people didn't think much of it. Frank always had a poetic way of talking. When the end came, it was quiet. No major send-off, no newsflash, just stillness. A man who once brought excitement to millions passed away with only the things he loved most around him, his solitude and the stories he hadn't told yet. Then came the legal process. His belongings were passed to estate handlers and investigators. And attention turned to the one place that had been left untouched, the garage. Locked, still, waiting. Whatever Frank had kept hidden inside wasn't just a bunch of old cars. It was the story of his life. Every piece chosen, every item saved. A record of someone who spent his days chasing what others overlooked. And when the key finally turned and the big metal door rolled open, those standing there realized something right away. Frank never stopped chasing the unbelievable. He had found it, and he had hidden it in plain sight.
Rescue something that's been sitting for a long time, and I can get it going and ride it around, and I can maybe sell it and get it to somebody else. Or a lot of
The door he left locked. The day they unlocked Frank Fritz's garage, something in the air shifted. It wasn't the kind of silence you hear at a funeral. It was heavier. The kind that creeps in when people realize they're about to step into something untouched, something personal. Police officers stood quietly at the edge of the gravel driveway, hands resting near their belts, exchanging glances but saying very little. The estate attorney held the key. And behind that thick metal roll-up door, years of secrets sat waiting. Until that moment, the garage had been sealed by a court order. It was part of the legal routine. Make a list of belongings, confirm who owned what, and make sure nothing valuable slipped through the cracks. But no one expected what they were about to walk into. From the outside, the building didn't look like much. The frame was steel, weathered by time. Ivy crept along the edges, and a side door, dented and faded, looked like it hadn't moved in 10 years. But the second the main door creaked open, even just a few inches, dust spilled out like smoke. So did something else. The weight of whatever Frank had left behind.
I'm really in love with this bike, but right now Norbert's saying he's not selling.
Inside, 8 vehicles were packed closely together. Some were hidden under old tarps. Others stood uncovered, their once bright paint now dulled but still proud in their shape. Near the front sat the 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air, its turquoise finish faded but still beautiful. Next to it, the 1967 Fairlane GT 390, one of Frank's favorite muscle cars. Tucked in the far corner, gleaming even through the dust, was the Cadillac Fleetwood, all shine and American elegance. It felt like stepping into a museum that hadn't seen a single visitor in years. But that wasn't all. There was one more car, and nobody could figure out what it was. It sat parked, oddly angled sideways near the back wall, covered by a gray tarp stained with oil. Its shape didn't match anything on Frank's known inventory. It was lower than the others, wider in the back. Its curves didn't follow the lines of anything common. It looked like a race car, or maybe even a prototype of one. An officer walked over and gently lifted the tarp. That's when everything changed. It was a Corvette. But not like any Corvette anyone had seen in person. Its body looked sharper. Its stance more aggressive than the Stingrays people were used to. The nose dipped low. The rear flared out unnaturally wide. The whole thing looked handmade, like a rough draft for something that never officially existed. But the most surprising detail? There was no standard VIN plate in the usual places, just a small brass tag, riveted to the firewall, faded letters, a strange string of numbers. Nothing matched anything in General Motors' official records. The officers reported it. The attorney took notes. Nobody dared move it again, but everyone kept looking back at it. Something about it didn't sit right. Then someone noticed something above the old workbench, barely visible through the dirt and grime stuck to the garage walls. A note, handwritten, yellowed with age. The ink had run in spots, but the message could still be read. I left behind everything there. Frank. He didn't explain what everything meant, but the way the note was placed, taped up where it couldn't be missed, made it feel intentional. A clue, like he'd planned for someone to find it long after he was gone. Later, a mechanic brought in to examine the cars took one look at the unknown Corvette and said it shouldn't exist. It looked like a 1963 Grand Sport, a Corvette designed purely for racing. But only 5 were ever made, and all 5 are accounted for. So what was this? It had some of the same details, but not all. It was different. Not a match, not a replica, something in between. And Frank, without ever telling anyone, had kept it hidden, covered, stored in the farthest corner of a garage. Almost no one was allowed to enter. People started asking questions. Where did he find it? Who gave it to him? Why didn't he ever talk about it? That garage, untouched for so long, had finally given up one of its secrets. But it was only the beginning. Because what Frank left behind wasn't just a hidden car. It was a puzzle. One that would soon pull in car experts, collectors, and curious onlookers from across the country. Everyone wanted to know how a man who spent his life finding forgotten things may have uncovered something the auto industry itself had tried to erase. When that garage door groaned open for the first time in years, nobody thought much would happen. People assumed they'd see the usual. Frank's known vehicles, his Bel Air, his Fairlane GT 390, the Nash Healey twins, maybe even the prized Cisitalia Nuvolari Spider. Fans had tracked these over time. They were featured in photos, mentioned by name in interviews, sometimes even shown on television. What no one expected was a quiet mystery tucked under an old tarp, something that didn't belong. After all the years Frank spent sharing his discoveries, this one had stayed hidden. The body shape felt familiar, but it was off. Low-slung fiberglass, oversized fenders. A Corvette, no doubt, but a very strange one. As they peeled back the tarp again, it became more confusing. The styling lined up closely with a 1963 Grand Sport, a legendary Corvette racing design. Chevrolet only built 5 before the project was canceled, and every one of those is accounted for. Yet here, this one sat. Quiet. Unknown. No press, no fanfare, no records, not even a whisper. There was no VIN in the usual spots, only that same brass plate, stamped with the words, "Experimental use only." It looked real. The fiberglass felt period correct. But the car had no listed chassis number. And the deeper the inspection went, the clearer it became. This car shouldn't exist. Frank had never spoken about it. Not on camera, not in interviews, not even as an aside. He had shared his love of vintage finds for decades, but this car he had kept to himself, quietly, on purpose. And once again, that message on the wall came back into focus. I left behind everything there. What had once seemed like a simple farewell now felt like a riddle. The Corvette didn't just raise eyebrows, it raised concern. It didn't line up with any documented production run. It didn't fit into GM's official records. And Frank, who was known for noticing every detail, had hidden it so well that nobody even knew to look for it. Some thought it could be one of the whispered, lost mules, test versions of the Grand Sports that were rumored to exist but never confirmed. Others believed it was even rarer, a one-off built secretly by engineers using the original molds. Something that had been hidden for decades and somehow landed in Frank's garage. Whatever the truth is, one thing's for sure. Frank knew exactly what he had. He never put it up for sale, never registered it, never posted about it. He placed it at the very back of his garage, undercover, like it was waiting for someone else to discover it one day. And now, that day had come. The news spread fast. Corvette experts took to forums. Historians pored over old records. GM said nothing. No official word. No denial. Just silence. Theories popped up overnight. Some said it was the most accurate replica ever built. Others believed it might rewrite a part of Corvette history. But in the middle of all that noise, one truth stood out. Frank took the full story with him. He never talked about the car while he was alive. Not once. And that silence, more than the car itself, is what people can't stop thinking about. In the end, it wasn't the car's value or its brand that made it so incredible. It was the fact that it wasn't supposed to exist. A man who spent his life bringing lost things to light had left behind one final surprise. No cameras, no announcements, Just 4 wheels, a brass tag, and a locked door, keeping the truth hidden just a little longer. Mystery that refused to stay quiet.
I'm not having any luck on this trip. I need a break. That's when I spotted the Moto Scoot. Ooh, this is cool. The Moto Scoot is a very rare scooter. How about $850? I mean, I see a lot of things here I don't know if you're doing anything with. I'll do $1,000.
Finding the unknown car in Frank Fritz's garage didn't just stir up interest. It opened the door to a flood of questions that no one, not even the people who knew him best, seemed able or ready to answer. It wasn't just about what the car was. It was also about why it was hidden, how it got there, and whether Frank ever intended for anyone to find it at all. Not long after word got out, the story landed on automotive forums. First the quiet corners, then everywhere. Soon it wasn't just classic car buffs talking about it. Old-school racing groups began dissecting every inch of the photos. Corvette specialists compared its lines and build to every prototype, test mule, and sketch ever connected to Chevrolet's short-lived Grand Sport program. But the more they studied it, the more questions they uncovered. The biggest one was also the simplest. Was it real? If this Corvette was an original Grand Sport that had never been logged or shown to the public, it meant Frank had somehow acquired a car that General Motors officially denied ever existed. But if it wasn't genuine, if it was a one-off, a recreation built from factory specs or spare parts, then another mystery took its place. Who built it? The craftsmanship made one thing clear. It wasn't built in someone's backyard. Every shape, every curve, every weld line looked like the work of someone who truly understood car design at a professional level. Then the whispers started. One person claimed Frank had quietly bought the frame and parts from a retired GM engineer in the early 2000s, long before his health began to fail. Another rumor said he picked it up through back channels at an estate auction in Flint, Michigan, not far from where GM once built their test cars. No way to prove either one, but the stories kept coming. In some ways, it made sense. Frank wasn't the type to chase trophies or fanfare. He was drawn to things others ignored. His garage wasn't set up to impress. It wasn't a showroom. It was a working space. A place to fix, study, and protect things that meant something to him. A car like this, strange, undocumented, possibly legendary, fit right in with the rest of his collection. But what rattled people the most wasn't just the car, it was the silence. General Motors gave no clear answer. When asked, a company spokesperson responded flatly that they had no information on any such vehicle. Still, it didn't stop the quiet talk among former engineers and factory workers. Some believe there may have been more Grand Sports built than officially listed, extra units meant for future tests, quietly stashed away when the program was scrapped. If Frank's mystery car was one of those, it wasn't just rare. It was a leak from a chapter of car history that was never supposed to be reopened. And then, there was that handwritten note again, taped above his workbench. I left behind everything there. The longer people looked at that message, the more intentional it seemed, like a clue left on purpose. Maybe Frank knew what kind of storm this would stir up. Maybe this was his way of keeping the story alive after he was gone. Or maybe it was just one last wink from a man who spent his life finding things nobody else could. As the news spread, the offers started rolling in. Museums showed interest. Collectors reached out, some even willing to buy it without any documents. One buyer from overseas was rumored to have offered a blank check. But nothing moved. The car stayed exactly where it had been found. Untouched, in legal limbo. Experts debated. Lawyers hovered. No one could agree on what it really was. And Frank? He never said a word about it while he was alive. Not in interviews, not in behind-the-scenes footage, not even a casual mention. That silence hangs over the car now, just as much as the tarp once did. He didn't hide it because he had to. He hid it because he chose to. Whether it's a missing factory prototype, a secret build from decades ago, or the most convincing piece of automotive trickery ever pulled off, no one really knows the truth yet. It's still locked away, just like the garage was, A legacy in silence. Even after the estate team had cataloged the garage and started legal proceedings, the mysterious Corvette stayed exactly where it had been first discovered. Silent, untouched, impossible to ignore. Experts came and went, each one more curious than the last, but no one could give a clear answer. There were too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions. And with Frank gone, the one person who could explain everything was gone too. That's what sets this story apart. It's not just about an unregistered Corvette. It's about the man behind the mystery and the care he took in hiding it. Frank Fritz didn't collect cars for attention. He didn't chase headlines or flaunt their worth. He chased the thrill of a rare find. A dreamer who was just as sensitive as he was funny, as his partner Mike Wolf remembered.
Absolutely. So, we've been very blessed. We've had the same crew for 13 years. And so everybody I work with was very close to Frank. And there's not a day that goes by that we don't think of him and talk about him, or...
For Frank, the best part was saving items others would ignore. This final vehicle, whether it turns out to be a missing Grand Sport or a unique custom build, embodies everything Frank valued. Mystery, history, and respect for beauty most of the world forgot. He never mentioned it, not because he thought he'd gain fame, but because perhaps that wasn't the point. Maybe in his mind, its value lay in simply knowing it was safe, waiting for someone sharp enough to notice. After he passed, Frank left behind more than rare cars. He left behind puzzles and emotions. He left behind a lesson. Collecting isn't about showing off. It's about awareness and stewardship. It's knowing something special is there and choosing to guard it. And that car, the one that doesn't show up in manufacturing records, is now part of his legacy too. Whether experts ever confirm it or not, it carries more of Frank's spirit than any documented classic ever could. In the end, Frank didn't need to prove anything. What mattered was preserving something that didn't require applause. Just a locked door, a dusty garage, and a man who knew the strength in letting silence speak for itself. So, what do you think Frank Fritz was hiding? And do you believe that car was ever meant to be found? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your theory. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and don't forget to check out one of the 2 videos on your screen right now. There's more to uncover. Thanks for watching.